All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I apologize for being a little early today. I've had a schedule change, so I need to go ahead and get this live going. So appreciate each of you being here. Welcome to the Legion of Heretics. This is a space for people who were told not to ask certain questions, people who were taught that doubt was dangerous, curiosity was rebellious, and certainty was a virtue. Here we do something different. Okay. This is what we're about. We explore religion, psychology, philosophy, and culture, not to tear them down and not to replace one set of dogmas with another, but to understand how human beings make meaning when life is difficult, uncertain, or unfair. So, this podcast isn't about exposing secret knowledge. We're not going to ask for money to get you to another stage to show you secrets. It isn't about exposing secret knowledge. It isn't about recruiting for belief. And it isn't about mocking faith or anything like that. It's about asking why certain stories take hold, how fear and trauma shape belief, and in what it means to live with wisdom instead of just false certainties. Now, from an Appalachian perspective, we examine conspiracy thinking, religious imaginations, power, authority, and the human need for coherence, always remembering that most beliefs are not about being right, but it's about survival. You won't find easy answers here. You will find careful questions. You'll find psychological insight without shame, skepticism without contempt, and faith without fear. If you've ever felt caught between belief and honesty, between loyalty and truth, and between doubt and meaning, you're not alone. That's why we're called the Legion of Heretics, because we know there's many. Where thinking for yourself is not a sin and curiosity is really a discipline. So here we go. There's a story people like to tell about the Appalachian region. It's a simple story. It's a lazy one, actually. It says that if people around here believe strange things, if they distrust institutions, if they question official narratives, if they hold ideas that sound a little conspiratorial, it must be because they're ignorant, uneducated, or afraid of progress. But that story doesn't explain anything. It excuses people from asking harder questions. Because what if Appalachia doesn't see less than the rest of the country? What if Appalachia sees more deeply? Because it has to. What, what if what looks like paranoia from the outside is often a long memory of betrayal passed down quietly, story by story? Tonight, we're not going to promote conspiracies. We're not going to mock belief. And we're certainly not here to recruit anyone into some new idea of certainty that we have. We're here to ask a better question, which is, why do these stories make sense here? Because you cannot help people think clearly if you refuse to understand why their thinking feels necessary. Okay. Appalachia is not a personality type. It's not a vibe, and it's not a meme. And it certainly isn't a lack of intelligence. Appalachia is a history of extraction, a history of promises made by people who never planned on staying around. It's a history of labor taken, of land stripped, and consequences left behind. When industries came, they didn't come as neighbors, they came as owners. When they left, they didn't clean up after themselves. So when someone today says, trust the system, we're not going to respond by saying yes, sir, because we have a memory. Psychologically, this matters. Culturally, this matters. Repeated institutional betrayal trains the nervous system to stay on high alert. It's not being anxious, it's just being on alert. This is what's called adaptive vigilance in psychology. If touching the stove keeps burning you, you don't keep touching it to prove that you're rational. You you learn something. So skepticism in this context is not pathology. It's a survival strategy that has worked for the Appalachian people for these many years. The problem isn't that people here distrust authority. The problem is when distrust becomes the only lens left. There's a healthy way to distrust authority. Okay, so another thing that outsiders miss is that Appalachia is a deeply oral culture. Truth here has traditionally been carried by people and not the institutions. So for us, stories matter. Tradition and testimony matters. Who said it and whether they stayed here matters. That doesn't mean facts don't matter. That doesn't mean you just throw logic out. It means facts are trusted through relationships. Psychologically, humans are wired this way. We trust people that we know, people that we've had a history with, people that share risk with us. So when an expert from far away speaks in polished language, when politicians claim to represent us and be on our side, forgive us if we're just a little standoff. When our neighbors tell us this happened to me, we tend to listen. Or if our neighbors tell us they're going to stand with us, then we're a little more apt to believe them. Not because they're always right, and not because we even always like our neighbors, but it's because they're close. We know them. We know they're coming and going. We know their habits. This creates an issue for people that are outside of our culture because they don't get it. But they don't understand that institutions often mistake this behavior for anti intellectualism. But it's not. It's about being relational. It's truth filtered through character, through consistency, and shared life experiences. And when institutions communicate with contempt, distance, or moral superiority, the brain doesn't hear the information. All it hears is threat. So that's a little bit about the cultural aspects of Appalachia. Now we need to talk a little bit about religion, but we're going to talk about it carefully. Not all religion and not all Christianity, but I'm talking about fear-based apocalyptic religion has shaped the psychological imagination of this region very deeply. Many people here were raised with a particular story. They were told that the world is secretly controlled by evil forces, that most people around and outside of us are being deceived, that truth is really hidden, and only a few really see what's going on. And then they'll talk about that the judgment's coming, there's a reckoning coming. These sorts of things train the mind. It trains people to look behind mere appearances. It causes them to distrust surface explanations. And it oftentimes treats certainty like a virtue. So when conspiracy narratives appear, they don't arrive like it's something new that's been invented. They arrive as something that's familiar. We understand them. It's the symbols of change, the structures. Uh, the structures you see, they change names, for each generation to the next. We were told back in the 80s when I was a kid that Gorbachev and the Russians, that's the mark of the beast because he had a birthmark on his head. You hear all this sort of stuff. The characters changed, and then we were told it was Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666, or you're told that it's Saddam Hussein or it's whoever the new leader is. So you got enemies everywhere, and they try to identify them. This isn't just because people are grasping at straws or they just want to believe crazy things. It's because we've been trained that way because of all the apocalyptic sort of preaching. And once this belief is tied to moral identity, once certainty equals faithfulness, changing your mind doesn't feel like you're learning something. Changing your mind feels like you're betraying. You're betraying your people. You're betraying a tradition. So that's why it's harder for Appalachian people to just change their mind about some new theological truth or to just change quickly to something that even seems so obvious and so factual. Because again, psychologically, it feels more like betrayal than anything else. Now, here's where psychology matters most. Human brains are about pattern making. They're pattern making machines. They're there to try to make these connections, to connect the dots. It's not a flaw. It's more a survival type of mechanism. But under chronic stress, like economic, cultural, or relational stress, the brain changes how it processes information. So when stress stays high, threat level detection increases. Ambiguity becomes uncomfortable. Just like I said, it's much simpler to have certainty. Certainty makes sense. Ambiguity or not having certainty uh, just feels too uncomfortable. Randomness feels dangerous. The mind starts connecting more dots, not because it's irrational, but because coherence soothes our anxiety. We prefer the certainty. This is why conspiracy narratives, or crazy religious beliefs may seem wild to other people, but it makes so much sense to people that are inside of it because they offer order instead of chaos. It's something they've grown up with. They've heard this. It's a familiar language. So something outside of that is chaos for them. I know some people in our region, uh, they've went away and they'll go to college and they'll come back and they're speaking a little differently and people are just freaked out by it. Like, oh, well, that college really hurt them. Well, it's not that. It's just they're not speaking the same sort of language now. Or, if you have a minister that comes in and he doesn't get up and scream and holler and shout and spit and all these sorts of things, we think, well, he's not even really preaching. What's he doing? Or what's this person doing? So again, it's not because people want to just be backwards or ignorant. It's just it feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like something they're familiar with. So it's not that people are addicted to falsehood. It's just that your mind seeks out to something familiar because of the comfort of it. Certainty feels like a relief, or familiarity feels like more of a relief. So once certainty sort of regulates your nervous system, you're going to defend that. Not because it's true, but because losing that feels so unsafe. This is why throwing facts at people rarely works. When you have these debates and people throw out facts and arguments and things that clearly make sense, but if they go against the familiarity of your bubble and what you're used to, you feel like you're under threat. So it's threatening your emotional regulation. You're not willing to consider the other side because it seems like a dangerous position. This is why ridicule always makes things worse. Mockery triggers shame. Shame triggers a defense. Defense locks belief in place. I don't know if you've ever seen people that have confronted Scientologists, or they try to confront Mormons, or Baptists try to confront other Baptists, you know, and they they try to talk about beliefs and how that their beliefs make sense, but other people's beliefs make no sense. This triggers a defense mechanism to people that have been inside of these things, have been inside of this cultural and religious system. So when people are mocked, their brains aren't thinking. They're not going to say, "Oh, thank you for letting me see this truth," or "Thank you for pointing that out." No, they feel disrespected. They feel like you're making them feel unsafe. They don't uh, they don't think you're helping them become better. And they start to feel contempt because of it. Yeah, okay, when their belonging to a group is threatened, people would rather cling harder to the group that offers them meaning and comfort, even if that meaning is distorted. Even if they go to these churches and they're told what a rotten, devilish dog they are, and that women that wear makeup are these Jezebels that are a bunch of whores, and they're horrible people, and all they think about is sexual things, and you hear this stuff from the pulpit that sounds absolutely horrible, and you think, who would sit and listen to this? But if people have a social belonging and a cultural relational bond with that group, there's a comfort there they're not going to feel anywhere else at that moment. So that's why it takes time to unravel these sorts of things. That's why we don't free people up by just facts alone. But you don't free minds by humiliating people or what they believe or their group. It only hardens them. So the real question here isn't, why do people believe weird things? The real question is, what kind of world makes these beliefs feel necessary? When people feel powerless, stories restore their agency. When life feels random, stories restore the order. When trust collapses, stories replace institutions. A conspiracy narrative or a crazy religion often isn't about control, it's about survival. The danger isn't that people search for meaning. The danger is when meaning becomes captivity. So Appalachian wisdom isn't about paranoia. It's a hard-earned perception as long as it stays free. So the goal isn't to strip people of stories. It's to help people hold stories without being owned by them. Wisdom isn't about having all the answers. Wisdom is knowing that wisdom is knowing what fear does to your answers. So you can question authority without losing yourself. You can doubt without becoming cynical. And you can seek truth without needing to make enemies. So this season, especially here, what we're going to be doing in Legion of Heretics this year, we're not trading one certainty for another. We're learning how to live without false certainty together. And if that makes us heretics, then I guess that's who we are. So I hope that maybe this helps you in some way to understand a little bit of the insight as to why some people may believe some weird things that you don't. Maybe you think Republicans or Democrats are crazy and weird, or maybe you think libertarians are crazy, or maybe you think, again, you might be in a Baptist church and you think the Baptist church down the road from you is crazy. Uh, that's okay. We're all just a little bit. We all believe some weird things, and that's okay. There's a reason why we do. There's a reason why we cling to these things, and that's why we talked about that. It's deeply a part of us. So it's not just about being right. It's about having some grace and having some kindness. So I hope this episode, if it resonates with you, I'd ask you to stay with us this year as we go through these things together through the podcast. I'm going to be bringing up some other lectures. I've got a new lecture series coming up in February, some interesting things. Some of what we're going to be doing is doing some theological studies. We're going to be doing some psychological studies. I'll be sharing with you some things I'm going to be doing through my PhD studies at Regent University. But I'm also going to start a series later this year teaching the history of philosophy. So I hope you'll tune in for that. It's a very interesting series. I hope that'll be helpful, and look forward to each of you letting me know how that we can be of help. I know we often say this, but we're not about certainty here. We're not about, again, trading out one certainty for another. We're just about being a place for you to have honest questions and to just say it's okay. All right. Thank you so much. This conversation is something that we're going to keep going with, and I hope that each of you have a great week and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.